New Conversations at the Commonwealth Club.
Can you tell I'm new here? Oh, I can't see. Good evening. I'm Carla Thorson. I'm the new Vice President of Programming here at the Commonwealth Club, the new George. I'm delighted to be here this evening, and I'm delighted to see, I can't see you, but this is the first gathering for the Leadership Circle in quite some time. 2 years. Welcome, everybody. And thanks so much for sticking it out with us through this rather trying time. And we are really delighted to have everyone coming back. And we're planning a significant return to in-person programs over the next weeks and months, COVID permitting. So it's an exciting time for the club, and I'm really glad to be a part of it and to be taking on this role at this time. So, as a reminder, please make sure you've turned off all of your technology, anything that goes beep, buzzes, lights up. Everyone here in this room will appreciate it, and everyone online who's watching will also appreciate it. And I also want to say welcome to those who are not joining us here in person, but who are joining us online. We appreciate anyone who is participating in our programs near or far. A reminder for everyone, we welcome your questions, and question cards will be collected throughout the program for those of you who are here, so please feel free to write your questions for the governor, and we'll collect them. And if you are joining us online, you can use the chat function on YouTube and share your questions that way. So now, it's my opportunity to introduce our guests for this evening. And yes, I have notes. Moderating tonight's program is someone I feel I know really well because I see him frequently on television, but I think it's actually his first time moderating a program here at the Commonwealth Club. Something that's going beep. Scott McGrew has been a reporter and news anchor at San Francisco Bay Area's NBC for more than 20 years. Another thing that's going beep. This is why I'm here, so that you have a chance to turn these things off. Scott particularly enjoys covering entrepreneurship and Silicon Valley startups. Scott is the host of the television show Press Here, a weekly roundtable featuring CEOs in conversation with world-class technology reporters, and the podcast Sand Hill Road about venture capital. Scott will be leading the conversation tonight with our featured guest, the chairman of the National Governors Association and Arkansas's 46th governor, Asa Hutchinson. Now in his second term, Governor Hutchinson is recognized for his leadership on computer science education and his focus on training for the jobs of the future. With a lifetime commitment to public service, Hutchinson has also served 3 successive terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, and President George W. Bush appointed him director of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and later he also served as undersecretary in the newly created Department of Homeland Security. His experience has established him as a national resource for his expertise on trade, energy, national security, and education, all topics which are open tonight for discussion. So with that, please join me in welcoming to the Commonwealth Club stage our guests for this evening, Scott McGrew and Governor Asa Hutchinson.
You bet. Thank you. So you did not make it up to the Razorback game because we hosted you on Saturday, right?
You know, my timing is awful. I should have been here 2 days ago.
I wonder about that, though. Did you deliberately avoid it? Because if you're flying on the taxpayer dime, right, you don't want to end up at a basketball game.
Well, I would have gone. I would have loved that. We had some other obligations I couldn't. But I was sort of counting on them winning. If they'd won one more game, they would have gone to the Final Four,
Yes.
and I guarantee you I would have been there.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have no
But
doubt.
We're very proud of them and how they did this year.
This is a fine man. We've got a great chance to get to know each other. One more round of applause and a very warm welcome to the Governor Hutchinson. So there are only so many details that we can go into briefly about your biography, but there's one that I think we skipped over. You won the governor's office with the largest win in Arkansas history, the most number of votes, incredibly impressive. There's one that we didn't talk about in the introduction, and I have a photograph, and isn't it wonderful that you've lived a blameless life, that you are not nervous, that a journalist is pulling a photograph out that you haven't seen?
That worries me.
Well, should it? Yes. Tell me about this photograph. He has not seen this before, and I realize folks at home can't either. Tell us what's in that photograph.
Well, this is a photograph of me as a young United States attorney. In 1985, we had a terrorist group in northern Arkansas called the Covenant, the Sword and Arm of the Lord. It was a neo-Nazi terrorist group. They had engaged in murders, and they had planned all kinds of violent acts. And so we went in to arrest James Ellison, leader of that group. The FBI, the SWAT teams from 5 states were there. We had the hostage rescue team. And they sent a plane for me from Fort Smith because the leader wanted to negotiate with me. So this is a picture of me putting on a bulletproof vest.
And I will point out,
going
you look to be about 10.
Well, I didn't dress for the occasion because I was in a white shirt, but that was an extraordinary time.
Yeah.
We actually negotiated for 3 days. The law enforcement did an incredible job. The leader of the group, along with a whole bunch of other bad guys in there, surrendered without a shot being fired. It's one of the most successful law enforcement operations we had.
No, sir, I'm gonna interrupt. It's one of the most badass things you've ever done. You were unarmed. You were extremely young. You were the youngest U.S. attorney in the country, right?
That's right. That's right.
Unarmed, and you walked in and negotiated a settlement that got them out without a shot fired.
That's exactly right, and you can't help but contrast that to about a year later when you had the Waco disaster, and some of our agents that were there at the CSA compound actually were in Waco and got wounded. So it was extraordinary, but I've, through that occasion, United States Attorney under the Reagan administration, head of the DEA, I've always had a role with law enforcement and supporting them, and of course as U.S. Attorney I did that. Now what I was thinking at the time that I was putting on that bulletproof vest as they threw that to me, I said, this is not why I went to law school. But it was an extraordinary time, very important.
Fast forward a couple of decades and you're the governor of Arkansas, and what are you doing in our fine city? I assume you're here to steal our talent and our tech talent.
Well, actually, first of all, it's great to be back at the Commonwealth Club.
20 years later.
Some people don't realize, but 20 years, almost to the month ago, I was here at the previous building. I spoke as head of the DEA, and I want you to know that this reception is better than I got then. So it's great to be back, and I have such a respect for this Commonwealth Club and its history. But what I'm here for is not only to talk about business in the technology sector and not necessarily to steal the technology business. I learned you can't do that because it's got a real presence here. But we have such a connection between Arkansas and the tech community here that a lot of people don't realize. And you think back in history as to the connections between Arkansas and California. It was in the Dust Bowl time during the Great Depression that the Arkies and Okies and the Grapes of Wrath, they came out here, and that's part of our history. My mom and dad were married during the Depression in Oklahoma. They didn't come out here. They moved to Arkansas, and we struggled on the farm. So that's my background, but it's also that connection between California has always been fascinating. And today you fast forward, and today we visited with Zipline. It is a startup company that's got good revenue now, but they do drone deliveries. They make drones right here in the San Francisco area, but they also have a facility in Arkansas because they're doing drone delivery for Walmart to the customer and dropping the merchandise by drone delivery. Incredible technology there. So we're visiting with them. Tomorrow we'll be visiting with Gatik, another tech company here that is engaged in the autonomous delivery. And we're the first state to actually deliver product through a driverless vehicle from the middle mile, they call it, it's from the warehouse to the retail store. We're doing it on a fixed route, but it is a California company, Gatik, that we're going to be visiting with. And so a lot of technology exchange between Arkansas and California. That's why we're here, and we love being here.
You've set up a commission in Arkansas to look at some of the laws and regulations, because with Walmart being so important to Arkansas, that autonomous trucks, drone delivery, those sorts of things, you would want to experiment. And you need to know, well, what laws do we need to adjust? What have you found something out so far that you know you need to adjust to attract in that sort of technology?
Well, some of them are very simple things, but for example, we call it the Council on Future Mobility. And we're looking at autonomous vehicles, we're looking at electric vehicles, we're looking at drones, we're looking at the future of transportation. And Arkansas has always led. We've got great logistics, we've got great trucking companies there. But what we see today is what going to be delivering the product 10 years or 20 years from now. So we want to get ahead of the curve. And simple things, for example, on autonomous vehicles, you look at all of our driver's rules, all of our transportation regulations, they talk about the driver's side and the passenger side. Simple things like that are not meaningful whenever you're looking at an autonomous vehicle. And I know that everybody gets nervous when you think about a driverless vehicle. Is that really a safe thing to do? You think about the error-prone humans that are looking at their text messages as they're trying to drive. I think we can use sensors very effectively and be safe.
Now, you are going to term out at the end of this term, and we'll talk more about that later. But some of your constituents, or a good deal of your constituents, are truck drivers or forklift operators or who work for Walmart. And they see their governor going out to California and looking at all the things. Now, how do you make that balance?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is that if we don't go with technology, then we're all going to be out of business.
Yes.
And as I came here, I looked out at the port and I saw, container ship backed up, waiting, being unloaded. And in Arkansas, we're waiting on those goods. And so we've got to have a more efficient means of transporting our goods. And if we can use technology to accomplish that, that's exactly what we need to do. There's always going to be the options of a driver behind the truck. I mean, we're always going to need those services, but we don't have enough right now. And so the trucking industry is looking for solutions, and if this can be one of the solutions, that will be good for the consumer, and it'll be good for those that are in the logistics business.
Speaking of laws and regulations, there are a number of laws in the South. In Texas, Florida just signed "Don't Say Gay," or they don't call it that, but that's what we in the media call it. Your state, where you're trying to attract talent, and I see this particularly in Texas, where people who in, I think, fairly unabashedly liberal San Francisco have issues with some of those laws. One of the ones you signed was a ban on transgender sports, the people moving back and forth. Do you understand when places like California object to that sort of thing? It's your state, it's your laws, it's your voters.
No, we do understand, and that reflects the diversity of our country and that we're all trying to sort through these issues. But for example, Walmart, Tyson, some of our large companies that depend upon diverse talent, they have a very inclusive workplace, and they express their concern. Now, I look at, there was two bills that came to my desk. One of them was a transgender health bill, and I vetoed that, which restricted, the health care being delivered to transgender youth. I vetoed it. It was overridden. And that just reflects, the consensus in the legislature on it. The other one was that simply banned biological males from competing in women's sports, and that just made sense to me. And so I did sign that. And I think that's something that, you don't want to deprive anyone of the ability to compete in sports, but you've got to have a fair playing field for the women athletics, and I believe in that, and I've got a daughter, and I want them to have every opportunity, and my grandchildren as well, and I think that's about fairness.
As head of the National Governors Association, you know Spencer Cox quite well, who I think makes an incredible balance of his conservatism with understanding where the world is going, et cetera. He vetoed a transgender sports bill not too long ago. And I think what he said was so interesting. I want to read it. He said about the bill, there are 4 kids in the state, 4 kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships, just 4 kids trying to find some friends and feel like they're part of something. I'm not challenging you with responding to that, but you and Cox and a number of other Republican governors, at a time in which we have grown so far apart, have found ways of bringing us together in some fashion. I think his veto is going to get overridden by the Utah legislature, and he may know that. But what I thought we wrote was touching. He said, "Why are we doing this? It's 4 kids."
I have incredible respect for Governor Cox, and he's a very strong thought leader. Governor Holcomb of Indiana also vetoed a very similar bill. They'll both perhaps be overridden. And his point, Governor Cox's point, is very telling, because he said it's not a problem in Utah. Mm-hmm. We don't have, and I think it's what Governor Holcomb said as well, and I looked at Arkansas, and we don't have transgender youth that we know are competing. And so we're passing laws that may or may not solve a problem, or may not be necessary. In fact,
it'll get us on television. It'll raise some money.
And there's a couple important points here. First of all, you look at the Republican Party. We have a debate among our governors. Some disagree. You've got Governor Cox, Governor Holcomb on one side. You've got other governors that disagree. So we're engaged in a debate, and that's healthy to have these discussions. You're going to have differences of opinion. And then secondly, we've got to avoid the habit, and I'm a Ronald Reagan conservative, where I don't believe government is a solution to every problem that we can dream up. And so whenever we see an issue, particularly in the cultural side, I think you've got to determine, is this an issue that should be addressed by the family? Is it an issue that is better addressed by a school board and at that local level, versus passing state laws or national laws even? And I think that is what I believe is a restraint of government. And we do need to get back to a restraint of government and not look at that as the answer to every problem.
Well, and I'm going to take some blame for this too in the media. And that is, we can take an issue, you could find an issue that would raise you money from the voters, that would get you on, Fox News Sunday and Meet the Press and whatnot. And it could be an issue that really, honestly, who cares? It affects so few people, or we can deal with it another way. But it raises money, and we've gotten to that point in so many of these issues.
Well, that's true. That's true. There's a dynamic that's not healthy for our society, in which extremes, drive us apart, but it also generates a listening audience. And I look at some of the talk shows today, and they are playing more to the base, whether it's left or right, mm-hmm. Versus bringing on guests that might seek some common ground. And I think there's still that opportunity. We talk about the National Governors Association. I'm proud to be chairman of that. It's an honor because it's bipartisan, and there's a lot of things that our Democrat colleagues and the Republican colleagues do not agree upon. But guess what? Every once in a while, we can find those narrow things that we can say, this is education. This is something we work together on. Or it might be infrastructure. And those are both examples of successes that we've had in working together in a bipartisan way. And that's one of my motivations in politics, is to try to bring people together more than pulling them apart. And to do that, you got to spend a lot of time listening and trying to find that common ground.
It's easier when we can all point to a set of facts that the sun rises in the east, and that and that frustrates me oftentimes when we cannot agree on the very fundamental basic facts. I know you know that Joe Biden won the election in 2020. This is something we can agree on?
We can agree upon that.
Okay. Do you have any discomforts? Oh, I wasn't. Now it seems like I'm pandering. But yes, that idea that if we cannot agree on those sorts of facts, that it becomes very difficult to debate the minutia of the things that are going to really matter with policy. If we cannot agree, masks is one of them. In California, we had a rule that you had to wear a mask. In Arkansas, you signed a bill that said you can't have a rule you have to wear a mask. Have I got that about right?
That's correct, for the government.
Yes. Okay.
Actually,
but where would we? And masks are, thank goodness, over. But where would we compromise there?
Well, first of all, that's been a challenge for us. You talk about agreeing upon facts. That during the pandemic, we got polarized, and we could not even have a common set of facts that we could agree upon.
Yeah.
And the challenge to us was, and I say to us, I'm talking about the nation as a whole, that the facts changed, the data changed, and what you saw at the very beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know very much. We made some decisions then, and then as science improved, or as we got more data, decisions were made differently. And then as you progressed through, you came to another set of conclusions. And then some people saw that and said, everybody's lying to us. No, it is a matter of making decisions based upon the best information you have at the time, and what you believe science dictates, and what you believe the public can accept. And that part, the last part of it, is different in a lot of different states. You have a big difference of opinion. But we're coming through that, and in terms of where in Arkansas, I had some different opinions with some of the other Republican governors that passed laws, and they signed them, that said private business could not have a vaccine requirement. I disagree with that. I think a Republican principle is that, the private sector, if they want to protect their workplace, whether it is from drug testing or whether it is from requirement of vaccine, that's a prerogative that they ought to have. And so that was the position I took, which was different from some other Republican governors. And so we didn't prohibit our private businesses from doing it, from having a vaccine requirement. The state does not have one. And so we did pass a law saying the state can't require it, the state can't mandate masks. That was after I did require masks at one particular point in time. So there's a lot of, inner workings with the state legislature that they wanted to see that as their prerogative versus executive prerogative. But every state managed it a little bit differently, reflects the diversity of our country, and whether it was the Biden administration or the Trump administration, the governors played a key role.
Yes, it did.
Every step of the way, and I think, by and large, I think the Republicans, the Democrat and Republican governors reflected their states and their different approaches to this, and we'll have a judgment down the road on how everybody did.
Well, I was going to ask that, because whether you're a governor or a president at the time of the worst of the coronavirus, that is going to be a major part of your legacy. And are you comfortable with everything the way it came out? Because at no other time in history did a state governor deal with the possibility of so many deaths, whether it's California or Florida or Michigan or New York or Arkansas, where these decisions were literally life and death.
Well, it's a time that I hope we never have to go through again. I hope we don't have an uptick. I know we're all wanting to be finished with it completely.
Aren't we glad to be here? Yes.
I'm at the top of that list. But it was a challenging time. It tested leadership. It tested communication. We do need to have a review of it. And that's a major point that whenever the dust settles on this pandemic, we need to have a 9/11 type commission and that reviews it. And I welcome that because I want history to review what were the right decisions, what were the wrong decisions, and I can handle it if we made a mistake in it. We made the best judgment as we could go along. I think one of the best decisions that I made was that we did keep our businesses open, and I remember after the pandemic hit in March of 2020. Just like everybody else, our schools were closed, went virtual. But then that summer, I made up my mind we needed to reopen schools. And we reopened the schools the next year. We kept them open to in-classroom instruction. We shifted virtually when we had to. But that was one of the best decisions, and we kept our businesses open. Some states said, well, you're an essential business, and you're a non-essential business. The non-essential businesses have got to close. We're going to keep these essential businesses open. It made no sense to me. We're one of 5 states, I believe it was, that never made that distinction. We kept them open. And in hindsight, I think that's one of the reasons we've recovered quickly. But it's a matter of providing for your family. It was a matter of what's the right government action and not the right government action. For Arkansas, we kept them open. That was a good decision in my judgment.
What are you doing in Arkansas that we should do in California? We Californians tell you what to do and how we got all the right ideas.
Well, first of all,
I'm sure it doesn't grow tiresome at all.
California carries a big stick.
Yes.
I tell you, in every way. But we're growing as a state, and what you can see from Arkansas is, first of all, we have a balanced budget, and we've had a balanced budget for 50 years or more. It's mandated by law that we have that. We have cut taxes. When I became governor, our tax rate, individual income tax rate in Arkansas was 7%. And we have lowered that consistently down to 5.5%. And that is in the middle of a pandemic that we continue to lower that because our economy continued to grow. And so that was necessary for us because I'm next door to Texas that's got no income tax, and Tennessee on the other side that's got no income tax. And so we're being competitive, we're lowering our tax, and guess what? We did that, we grew the private sector, and we managed state government. And we have $1.2 billion in reserve funds. We've got a surplus right now. We've raised teacher pay. We've raised law enforcement pay. We've had the largest increase in education funding. And so I'm not telling California what to do, but I'm saying that works really well for us. And people like to go to lower tax states.
One of the things that you've mandated with, I assume with that money helps, is computer science education. You're one of 3 states that require it? And it's a requirement in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, let me take a moment on that because that was not only the key issue that I wanted to serve as governor and lead on, but also as chairman of the National Governor Association, I'm pushing nationally computer science education. And how this started is when I was in Homeland Security, I saw that we can best protect our country from a terrorist attack through technology, data analytics, and it was such a key tool. Fast forward when I'm running for governor in 2014, my granddaughter, Ella Beth, who was 11 years old at the time, made me a mobile campaign app with her dad over the summer, and she gave it to me, and you can volunteer, you can contribute. She's 11 years old. And I said, we ought to, if she can do this, we can do more in our schools. And so the first thing we did, we required every high school in Arkansas to offer computer science, to offer it. We integrated in a curriculum of our lower grades, And all of a sudden, we went from 1,100 students taking computer science to today we have over 12,500 students taking it. We have more girls taking it, more minorities taking it, and this year we did mandate it as a requirement to graduate. And so we're one of 3 states that have done that, and it's transformed our opportunities for our young people. But what it's also done is that it's reimagined education, where we had fewer than 20 teachers that could certified to teach computer science when we started. Now we have over 650 that are certified. So they have transformed the education. But what is the biggest benefit to our state, besides the students, is that it brings technology companies in. And we have technology companies, logistics companies, and we aren't going to be able to keep them if we don't provide the talent. You've got Stanford University, you've got high-tech skills here.
You need to say Cal Berkeley also, if you're gonna mention one.
All right, I got to be political here.
Exactly. It's a bipartisan group out there.
And so it's been a very successful initiative. It's sort of one of my legacy issues with computer science education. And now we're promoting it nationally with all the governors. We're having regional conferences in Boston. We did in Bentonville. We're in Denver. And so our goal is to see this proceed very quickly and accelerate in terms of our education, because it's a national security issue for our country. If we cannot develop the talent to determine our technological future, then we're going to either import that talent or we're going to fall behind. And we cannot fall behind in this area of technology and the future opportunity it brings for our young people.
Speaking of technology, you have a lot of aerospace, and some of them are literally making the warheads that are taking out those tanks. You visited some of those factories recently.
I did. And first, I'll say I went to Israel this year, right between the Delta variant and the Omicron variant. I got to go to Israel. And as I went to Israel, I got to meet with the Prime Minister, and I spoke at their Smart Mobility Conference there. But the Prime Minister found out that in South Arkansas, we have another California company, Aerojet Rocketdyne, that has locations, facilities in Camden, Arkansas. And we have Lockheed Martin, we've got Raytheon, and these companies also produce the Iron Dome for Israel that protects Israel from the rocket attacks. And so as I'm with the Prime Minister, he says to me, "Governor, would you go back to Arkansas and thank them for making what it takes to protect Israel?" And so I was able to convey that message, and then they're making the Javelins, many of the missiles that are needed as defensive weapons for Ukraine. So I went down there, had an incredible town hall meeting with those defense workers. I thank them for what they're doing. And Arkansas is one of our leading exports is aero defense products. And of course, that's big in California. It's significant to us in Arkansas. And I tell you, whenever they're making these defensive weapons, they're thinking about the lives that it saves in Ukraine. And every night we all go home and we see suffering in that country. We see the incredible courage of President Zelensky. And we're thinking, what more can we do? Should we be doing more to support Ukraine? And I, for one, believe that President Biden has handled this well in bringing Europe together in support of this effort, and I think Europe has stepped up to the plate. But we're providing them defensive materials to protect Ukrainians, but what they need are those MiG missiles from Poland. And we need to get them the weaponry that they need to protect themselves, whether it is on ground or their airspace. And we don't want to accelerate that war, but we need to help Ukraine protect themselves.
That is the balance, isn't it? Trying to find the difference between supplying them and causing the Third World War.
That is absolutely true, and that's the reason I don't believe we should do a air-free zone
Right,
over
no-fly zone.
Ukraine, no-fly zone, because that would require us to take out some of the surface-to-air missiles that are in Russian sovereign territory, and we can't do that, and you don't want to jeopardize our pilots without that. And so you can't do that, but you can do more to give Ukraine the tools. Secondly, I don't believe we can let Mr. Putin determine the actions that we take. I don't think he can draw the line and say, you can't cross this. I think we need to give Ukraine independently what they need to protect themselves, and we need to do it very quickly.
You have also offered, as the state of Arkansas, to shelter Ukrainian refugees.
I have. I mean, that's not a hard call,
No.
but it was an important thing. And while Europe is taking most of those refugees, and naturally so, it's close geographically, whenever President Biden said that the United States will take, 100,000 or so refugees, I immediately said, Arkansas supports that and we will take it. And I had actually calls from different places in Arkansas saying, we want them here. And it's an affection that we have. It's an identity with their suffering, their love for freedom. But it's the right thing to do.
And you did the same with Afghan refugees.
We did, and that was not received in the same way, but it was actually very important because these are our, could be interpreters, it could be those that stood by our troops over there. We were pulling out, is causing untold damage there in Afghanistan. So Arkansas stepped up and said, yes, we will take our...
You said not accepted in the same way. I assume you mean that some of your constituents had some concerns.
I did, and most of them, by and large, understood the importance of accepting them, but, you know, it was a different culture. There was a little bit more hesitancy there, but we took those. We have hundreds of Afghan refugees in Arkansas, and we want to provide that same level of love for them that wanted to have an opportunity for a new life as we do other refugees.
I appreciate you speaking about that honestly. Now, with your experience in Homeland Security, we also have Central American refugees. Where do we accept them?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have a couple of different countries that have a protected status. I'm talking about those that came, I believe, from El Salvador during the war. So we have taken large numbers of refugees from those Central American countries that were war-torn for a particular period of time. Now, if you fast forward to where we are today, we've got a serious problem on our southern border, and I believe we are a land of immigrants. We cherish that melting pot of America, and we can't ever forget the vibrancy that immigrants bring to our country and their thirst for freedom. But we do have to have that legal path. And so I think we have to be stronger on our southern border, but also we need to help Mexico be stronger on their southern border. And that's where we have a lot of the caravans that come up. And that is a heartache for any mom or dad to see.
It is, because it's hard to see the small Ukrainian child who is fleeing violence, and it's hard to see the small Central American child who is fleeing violence. So you and I would take our wife and our children and cross that border ourselves, I'm quite sure, to get them to safety. We would do what was necessary to protect our families. Yes.
And then there's also the economic opportunities that they seek as well. And so we have to be a country that accepts genuine asylum seekers, whether they're from Central America or not. But they have to have the checks done to make sure that's a legitimate asylum claim, because you do have the trafficking groups that are bringing up for money, and they are not legitimate claims, and we've got to be able to sort through those. But one, we have to have the means to provide asylum for those legitimate refugees. Secondly, we need to help change the dynamics in those Central American countries so that they don't see only the opportunities for their life and their children here in the United States. Hopefully we can achieve that balance that's needed.
You were also the head of the Drug Enforcement Agency, and you mentioned the last time that you were here that there were protesters outside, and I almost am a little disappointed there are no protesters. You're not maybe stirring up the pot enough. But I saw a photograph of one fella. He had a big top hat and little sunglasses, and on the sign it said something about pot or something like that, which of course now is entirely illegal in California. There have been these terrible progression with some of the other opioids that have been just awful. When you look at the landscape, and I kind of want to break it into both marijuana and opioids. Let's maybe start with marijuana. But when you look at the landscape and you think, I spent part of my career trying to stop this. Do you feel like you lost in the end?
Well, whenever you're looking at marijuana, the climate has changed dramatically.
But it was once your job to keep marijuana, and obviously some states still do. But
well, actually, it's still a violation of federal
law. Yes.
Now they got a few clauses in there that winks and nods at the states that they can do what they want to do on marijuana. In Arkansas, the voters voted in medical marijuana, and so under my leadership, we have now cultivation centers. We've got retail distribution centers. So I'm head of the DEA, and life has changed. But it's a serious problem. Whenever you look at the opioids, when you look at the fentanyl.
And that's the serious side of my question is, could you have imagined at the time that this would get so much worse?
It was my hope that it would not, but it has gotten worse in the sense of we've lost so many lives, and the fentanyl is something that's new that's coming in that's so deadly, and it's poisoning our streets. And then the opioids that takes someone that has an injury and all of a sudden they're addicted. We have to change that. And it's also, and let me talk about when I was head of the DEA just for a
Please.
second. I was a DEA administrator that believed that law enforcement is critical because that brings people to confront their addiction many times, and that will lead into treatment. Secondly, you need to have investment in education, and you need to have investment in the rehabilitation side. And so that's why I believed in drug courts that gives alternative to incarceration for those that have an addiction problem. I've taken that philosophy as governor, and we don't need to be sentencing to long terms. Those that have an addiction problem, we need to get them help, and we've tried to address it in that way. But we've got to invest more in the mental health side, the addiction counseling, both as a state and as a nation, because it's really hurting our families.
You've actually given me a great segue to one of our audience questions. And a reminder, if you can send them up here, or if you're on YouTube, put them in the chat. In light of the commonalities you shared between California and Arkansas, do you also have a rampant homeless problem in your state? And if so, could you please shed some light on how you are handling it?
We do not have the homeless problem in Arkansas that you see in California. We do have homeless, and I think the approach that you've got to take is to make sure that you have an investment in shelters so that they have an alternative, that they can go to a shelter as needed. You also know that, and this is true across the country, that it could be an addiction problem that they have or a mental health problem. And we've got to address those head on. But I do believe as a nation that we need to make sure we provide those options for our homeless, and that we continue to care for them. But we also don't want that to be the image of America. And we don't want to fuel that and increase that. We want to provide the resources to reduce that. And that should be an objective. And somehow we're seeing, I think, our homeless population really grow across the country and our larger cities particularly.
Question asks, what does the Republican Party do to get back to the traditional values? And you spoke of a number of them. And I'm going to, this isn't on the card, but I'm going to add to that question. When we think of what traditional Republican values are, free trade, low tariffs, world engagement, those aren't currently Republican values. How do we even define the problem? The Governor Hutchinsons and the Governor Coxes and the John McCains and the Tom Cottons of the world are different than DeSantis and some of the others. And how do you think of yourself? You said a Reagan Republican, and it's telling that you had to make that distinction.
Well, my parents were independents. One voted for John Kennedy, one voted for Richard Nixon. I grew up in making my own decision, and I identified with the principles of Ronald Reagan, and I'll expand on what you said as what I think are fundamental Republican principles. But the principles of our country. I mean, it is world engaged. It's leadership. It's a strong America. That is so important about our country. And as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, the Russian dissident, if America doesn't lead the free world will not have a leader. Mm-hmm. And so we have a responsibility, and I want America to lead and be strong enough to lead. It's about equal opportunity, and what other countries see about America is that you can start on the bottom rung and you can be on the top rung. Economically, you can progress, and it's unique about America, the opportunities we have. And that's about a fair system. And we have to fight for fairness, and that's what the Republican Party ought to be representing, is fairness in our system, whether it is criminal justice or economic opportunities. Those are fundamental values. And then it's the restraint of government as well. And you apply that in different ways, but I think you always have to ask yourself, is this the role of government, or is this the role of the private sector and the nonprofit community? Is it the role of the family? And so we've got to not always look at government as a solution to every problem. Those are, to me, Republican principles. But you start really with a strong America, with a commitment to freedom, equal justice, and that fair opportunity to move up that ladder.
You earlier said that you would support a commission, a 9/11 style commission, to look into what we did well and what we did poorly in COVID, because it would protect a generation 100 years from now. You know, we did this, we learned from it, we wrote it all down, here you go. I think there would be some in the Republican Party that would push back against that. They pushed back against the January 6th commission, which there was an attack on a Capitol. Of course we're going to, try to investigate that. Does that do you get pushback, and does it frustrate you?
It doesn't frustrate me, and that's very important that I belong to a tribe, but I'm not a tribalist. Not everything my tribe does is always right, and we need to be able to think through these issues. And to me, January 6th was a terrible embarrassment to our democracy and to our peaceful transition of power. It was crimes that were committed that day against our democracy. And so we ought to support a review of that. Now, January 6th, what's happening in Congress is not a perfect system. There's better ways to do it, but we need a review of that. We need 9/11, and sure, you're right, some of my party won't agree with that, but I think it's important. And you've got to work together to be able to figure out the right way to do it. Let me come back to another point on the party, though, that impacts California. I believe the Republican Party needs to be able to have a message that can resonate in California. We cannot win the presidency, we cannot continue to be a national party if we cannot build and have a message that works in the West Coast. And I think that whenever you talk about the importance of the rule of law and respect for that, and that should resonate in California. When you're talking about the finding the common ground on education and the strong America that can lead, those are messages that resonate here. And somehow we have got off target in our tenor, where we are no longer a compassionate people. And we've got to remember that we are compassionate as well as principled, and you can have both.
I look back, and this is just a personal observation. This reflects nothing about, anything I represent, et cetera. But I look back at the previous two presidential elections where your choice was Barack Obama or John McCain. and then Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, and what wonderful choices they were. Yes, you may have come down one way or the other, but any of those men would have been fine presidents of the United States. It was not the hold your nose and pull the lever sort of thing.
You're exactly right, and that's where, if you look at bipartisan issues and how you work together, the first principle is you have to stop demonizing the other side. And I'll never forget John McCain, where someone in a town hall meeting stood up and said something really bad about Barack Obama, and John McCain
says he was Islamist or something. Yeah, yes.
And he came to his defense.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that's what I miss about John McCain,
Yes.
is that honesty and frankness, and there's plenty of things to disagree about, and I want everybody to understand that I feel very firmly in my convictions. I've been in this for a long, long time, but you can be principled, and you can at the same time work to find some common areas, and you can respect and be civil in the debate that you have, and that's what my passion is looking ahead for our country, that we have that kind of leadership again.
Well, there's the question: are we polarized? This from the viewers and people here tonight. Are we polarized to the point making national survival impossible in present form?
Well, I think we all have to be. It's a great question, and we need to be introspective about this. I think political leaders need to look at: am I conducting myself in a way that reflects on the goodness of America and the future of America and the model of public service that we want, and the model of civility. But I think it's also, as you pointed out, Scott, the media has to be introspective here. And I can't tell you how many shows that I've been bumped from because I was not crazy enough.
As someone who produces television, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
We've run out of time. Our apologies to Governor Hutchinson.
And so I'm on the national media quite a bit.
Sure.
There's shows I won't go on. There's shows I will go on.
Tell us. Yes, what?
Well,
Go on.
I will go on a show that gives you a chance actually to answer the question, where you can get your message out, and that you're not simply a tool for the agenda of the interviewer. Now, anyway, I don't want to be harsh on the media, but we need to be introspective.
No, be harsh on the media.
But also,
it's deserved.
It's everyone in this room, and it's every town hall meeting. It's school board meetings. How do we conduct ourselves with people we disagree with? Mm-hmm. It's social media. How do we convey our thoughts without being an arsonist? Mm-hmm. And we'll learn our way through this. I'm an optimist about America. You ask, are we going to continue to be a great nation? Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll get it together. And I think the future is very bright. But I think a little introspection is good sometimes.
One of the things in social media every Christmas, somebody objects to the Starbucks cup. And we in the media will then say, well, there's this thing, and it's just one lady in some town online who's now worried about the reindeer and what they represent or something. And I watch us do that, and you think before social media, nobody cared what she thought. And now we're broadcasting it, and now people are taking sides, and I will take the blame for the media for that we do that. This is an online question, and a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put questions in the chat. What is your relationship with the Democratic governors, including past ones in your state? I wonder to whom they're speaking, and current Democratic governors.
Let's think about past Democratic governors in Arkansas, one of them being Bill Clinton.
Oh, that's right.
Maybe that's who you were thinking about. But Bill Clinton, when he was governor of Arkansas, I was chairman of the state Republican Party. And then when I was in Congress, he was president. And by the way, that was the last time we had a balanced budget in our nation, mm-hmm. when I was in Congress and he was president. Mm-hmm. Actually, and George Bush was president too during that time. But a good relationship. Now, we've been competitors, but respectful competitors. I've had we've really worked together on a number of projects, including some of the projects that he has through the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock. Mike Beebe, former governor of Arkansas, my predecessor, I ran against him and I lost. And then he had governor 8 years, and I came back and I won. And we have a good relationship. But let me talk about current governors. Phil Murphy is my vice chairman, governor of New Jersey. And he and I have worked together on a number of projects in terms of messaging in behalf of the national governors. And so, you know, we've issued statements in support of the infrastructure bill. We just issued a statement today about America's competitiveness and how we need to do more technology development here versus doing the manufacturing in China or elsewhere and being dependent upon it. You know, how we arrive at that is we negotiate the language. And so, you know, first they want to come out and they want to be fully supportive of the Senate or the House bill. And I say, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to agree to that. And we negotiate, we find common ground. And so I like working with him. And John Bell Edwards down in Louisiana, he's a little bit of a blue dog Democrat governor, but he's a Democrat, and I'll be with him next week at a human trafficking conference. And so, you know, the National Governors Association is probably one of the few truly bipartisan, effective groups today. When I was in Congress, you would have bipartisan meetings. Well, they started training everybody separately. And so you don't have that opportunity to work together again. You have the Republican caucus, you got the Democratic caucus. The governors, we have a National Governors Association that we work together. And I think it's an effective organization, and it goes to prove that governors can make a difference in national policy, and Democrats and Republicans can find, whether it's infrastructure, computer science education, or whether it's competitiveness, things we can agree upon.
I think particularly during the pandemic, we saw the strength and importance of governors. That, you know, they say when you're voting that it is probably the person on the water board that is going to cause you more pain in your personal life than the President of the United States. It's the, you know, it's the moving up the municipal into county and into state. But I think there is a lot of room for governors to get on television, they have the ability to have a voice to bring us back together.
I agree with you completely, and we demonstrated that during COVID. We had weekly calls, if not more frequently, with the White House task forces. We had Democrats, we had Republican governors on there, and I want to compliment President Trump that he responded to Democrat governors just as quickly as he responded to Republican governors. And then whenever President Biden and his White House coronavirus task force took over, there was a seamless transition. It was a good handoff, which I was worried about. The vaccine was being developed during that time. There was a difference in philosophy. The Biden administration wanted to manage it more centrally from the federal government perspective and control some of the channels of distribution, which was tighter with the federal government than what was under the Trump administration. But just illustrations of where we led, we worked together, and it should be encouraging, I think, to America whenever you see how well we worked together during that time.
Was there a time when, during the worst of the pandemic, when, you know, the California and the New Yorks, when a lot of the power was in the state to get these things done? And I remember it was the governor of Virginia who had flown in things from Korea because his wife knew somebody. Was there a point in which Arkansas is a relatively small state, in which you thought to yourself, I'm not going to get my fair share?
Your story is absolutely correct. It was actually Larry Hogan of Maryland. And
yes.
It was his wife that
who had grown up
was
in
from
Korea.
Korea.
Yes.
And so he brought in a shipment of testing supplies from South Korea. And yeah, it was a challenge for us, both in testing supplies and therapeutics. And so we were not able to get it. All the states were on their own and competing to get it, and we would be ordering our supply, and we would have to order time on the factory floor, and it was for PPE as well as anything, the mask and everything. And then New York would come in, and they would say, we will double the price for that factory time, and so we're outbid by another state. So yeah, it was a struggle for us. We actually had a shipment coming from Europe headed toward Arkansas, and it got to Spain, and Spain said, we need this, and they confiscated it. That was a challenge that governors faced during that time, but we managed through it with a lot of difficulty.
Was there a moment, I mean, you're a man of faith, was there a moment in which you said to yourself, I'm not sure I can handle this? I mean, it's a lot.
It was not. I am a person of faith. I take my faith seriously, and prayer makes a big difference. And I remember early during that time period, we had a season of prayer publicly for the challenges that we faced as a state and the health crisis that we were in. I prayed more regularly probably than it should have been an example for all of my life how I prayed during the pandemic. But I was blessed with good people around me, and we had a health director that was a person of faith as well, and so it was a challenge. But when I think about the challenges I faced, they're nothing compared to our healthcare workers,
Sure.
Our nurses that were out there, and how they were struggling and dealing with death and their own safety as well, and their children. So it was just a tough time for our country, but once again, we're resilient. We come through it, and we're excited to be together again, and I think the future really looks bright.
I've lived in a number of places around the United States and spent some time in Salt Lake City. It's how I know Governor Cox. And there are places that if you haven't been to Salt Lake City, if you haven't been to Arkansas, you may have a vision in your head of what it represents and what it is and those sorts of things. How do you market Arkansas in a way that says more than, we're that little state kind of near Texas?
Or as former President Herbert Walker Bush described when he was running against Clinton, he said Arkansas is that state between Oklahoma and Texas.
Yes.
He had his geography off just a little bit during that time. We're over to the side.
You may recall that President Trump congratulated the entire state of Kansas on their big Kansas City Chiefs win in the Super Bowl. Yes.
But that is a little bit of a challenge for a state like Arkansas, particularly when I travel internationally.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I would connect Arkansas with is former Senator J. William Fulbright, who started the Fulbright School and Scholars. And so every country has benefited from that scholarship program. And so that's Arkansas. And then, of course, many of them remembered, but I remind them that former President Bill Clinton was from Arkansas. And then everybody knows Walmart, but sometimes they didn't make the connection between the international home of Walmart and Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Dassault Falcon Jet, everybody knows of those Falcon jets. They
Sure.
buy them globally. Well, I remind them that if you buy a Dassault Falcon Jet, you've got to come into Little Rock, Arkansas to pick it up, because we do the final assembly there. So you start telling those stories, and probably the one that attracted the most attention was say that Arkansas is the only place that has the diamond mine in North America, and you can come and you can actually hunt for diamonds. You can pay $17, come down here to Nashville, Arkansas, and you can hunt for diamonds.
As I recall, there's a diamond on your flag, isn't there? Is that?
That's right. We're the diamond state. Well, yes.
All right. Yeah. Good. I can quiz you. What's your state song?
Well, don't
State flower.
my wife is very, very good at all of this. She will
Well, as First
tell
Lady,
you
she
a
ought to be.
long story.
You mentioned Walmart, and this was a question from the audience. Besides Walmart and Tyson, which other areas of fuel your economy?
Well, one new exciting area is that soon we'll have one county in northeast Arkansas, Mississippi County. It has Blytheville, Osceola there. And we will produce more steel in that one county than any other county in the United States. And we've have Nucor-Yamada Steel. We have U.S. Steel that moved in, as long as a whole raft of other steel companies surrounding it. But United States Steel out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, just announced, which we won the competition for, 900 jobs, a $3 billion investment, and the average wage rate will be $100,000
Oh.
for those 900 jobs. And it'll be the most technologically advanced steel mill probably in the world. And it'll all be right there in northeast Arkansas. So that's been a great success story for us, and something that probably everybody doesn't know.
Just briefly, the last question was about climate change. You got a big steel mill, but Arkansans believe in climate change, and you're doing something to fight it?
We are. First of all, I said that we're the diamond state. We're also the natural state. We love our beauty. We got 2 national forests. We've got 50-some state parks. And so come visit us, spend some money there. But we have the Buffalo National Scenic River, extraordinary natural resources there, and very proud of those. And we work hard to keep them beautiful, keep the air clean, our streams clean. And, I grew up on the Spavinaw Creek, and I drink out of the creek. That's what I remember in our state. But let me talk more specifically about our climate and being sensitive.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes because I've got 4 minutes left, but go
All right.
right ahead.
We're a big solar state.
Okay.
So we have solar energy, we have nuclear energy, but the solar is growing because Arkansas has more days of sunshine than Florida. And so it's a very
The Sunshine State.
it's a very good state for solar, and we're expanding very broadly in that.
So you will term out at the end of this term. That's in January. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I saw a frown. So maybe, what do you wish you had more time to do?
Well, in Arkansas, what I wish I had more time to do would be to develop our workforce education. We've done a lot there. We're continuing to improve it, but it's so critical to our young people. I enjoy tremendously the economic development side of the job of being governor. But I'm happy with 8 years. We've had a very successful time, from lowering taxes, transforming state government, focusing on education. And then, also we passed a big transportation bill. So we've done a lot, and we're going to continue over the next 10 months. Now, your next question is?
Well, I think you know my next question.
I want to let you ask it.
All right. Well, where do you go from here?
Well, and I've spent a lifetime in public
And if you'd like to declare just here, I think that would be exciting.
in California.
In California, that'd be a real political move, wouldn't it?
I've spent 25 years as a practicing lawyer, so I enjoy the private sector. I've done a lot of business side of things, but I am concerned about our country, and when I say concern, I just believe that America continues to need to project strength abroad. Mm-hmm. After 9/11, I was at Homeland Security, and I was sent by the president over to Europe to help negotiate agreements on exchanging information to help detect terrorists. And the goodwill that the United States had in Europe at that time was extraordinary. They know how we fought for their freedom in World War II. They know how we've been strong allies with NATO. And then they supported us after 9/11. I see a lot of that squandered over time. And we need to rebuild America not just as a strong nation, but as a good nation. And so that is important to me. it's important to me that we give our young people that opportunity of moving up, of fairness in our system. And so I want to see our country strong on those values, and I want to be a part of that future. So I want to be engaged this year on those national issues, and stay tuned for next year. We'll see.
I look forward to staying tuned. Thank you, Governor, so very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
I also want to thank everyone who was here, and then, of course, everyone online as well. Now, this program and others like it will soon be online at the website as well. One of the most exciting things of the evening is I've never adjourned anything in my entire life. But I am to say, I am Scott McGrew, and this Commonwealth Club program is now adjourned.